So this is a conversation with June Brooks Ewing, my mother. And so just first tell us your name, where you were born, and when you were born, and as much as you can remember about your parents and grandparents.
I was born Edith June Brooks on July 31st, 1937, in LaGrange, Georgia, where I lived most all my life until I left for college. My parents were Maybelle Brooks and Joe Brooks, Joe Alton Brooks and Maybelle Williams Brooks. My mother was one of 8 children plus 8 children with the second wife. So there were 16 of them all total, and we had reunions every single year with 16 families. It was really kind of nice to have all that, and we kept going certainly all the time my mother was living, and a few years after that, and then sort of stopped. But our last meetings were in Oxford, Alabama, because my parents were from Alabama. I don't really remember any of my grandparents with the exception of my mother's father, because all of them had died young before I was born. My mother's mother was Mary Elsie Fullilove, which I love that name, Fullilove.
Yeah.
And she married, when she married into the family, no, she was a Gable first. She was Mary Elsie Gable, who married a Fullilove, so she ended up being Mary Elsie Fullilove. And that was my mother's mother, and she died at 38. And then my daddy's mother died at 39. I think my daddy's mother had got TB from the hospital. And my mother's mother, they said died of a stroke, but I'm thinking it might have been an aneurysm. But at any rate, it was an early, they both died at an early age. My grandfather, Paul Williams, was the only one I ever knew, and when we visited him, I remember he had this big head of white hair, and he loved for us to comb his hair or brush his hair, and we also, in the beginning, we had our family reunions at his house, an old country house in Alabama, in Pine Hill, Alabama. And the thing I remember about the inside of the house was the organ. They had a pump organ that I always loved to go in the house when I was growing up and play with that.
So your grandmother's name was Fullilove, but your grandfather's name was Williams. What happened there?
Oh, it was actually, that must have been my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was the Fullilove,
Okay.
I guess. It's kind of hard, not knowing any of them,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to remember
Keep it
how.
straight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To keep it straight. That's about as well as I can remember. Now you will make me want to go back and check that out to see for sure.
Yeah.
What that story is. But yeah, my great grandfather was a medical doctor, and David's great grandfather was a medical doctor, and they both lived in sort of the northwestern part of Georgia. And during the Civil War, they were both doctors during the Civil War, and David is so certain that they knew each other. He just thinks that's such a neat thing that they would know each other.
Probably so. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the medical community, you would think.
Right. He thinks that they were probably friends because there were not so many doctors back then.
Right.
And so it would be unusual that they didn't know one another.
Right. So what about your daddy's parents and grandparents?
My daddy, Joe Alton Brooks, his father, my grandfather, was Pascal Frank Brooks. who died I think at 51, and Daddy's mother was Mary Alice Breed, and she died at 39. She's the one who died from TB that she contracted while in the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah. So I never knew them because they died so young. So I never knew any of those grandparents, and only one of my mother's parents. Because her mother died at 38. I don't know if that's in the first part or not. And then, yeah, the Mary Elsie Full-of-Love was mother's mother. And that was my grandmother who died early. And I liked her name, though, but her parents were Gables, and they were from Germany. So she was pretty much a full-blooded German.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting part of
your
my background, of our background,
Yeah. So, just starting from the beginning, you were born in LaGrange.
LaGrange in Troup County.
Tell us about where you were born. Were you born at home?
I was born at home. Dr. O'Neill was our family doctor. He was my family doctor all the way through until I was married and living elsewhere. So he was the doctor in town, and he came out to your house to deliver babies. And so, yeah, I and my two siblings were all born at home. I'm the third and youngest of the three. My sister is 9 years older, and brother was 3 years older. No, 6 years older. So there's 3 years between the two of them. And so Mary Alice was born, and 3 years later Billy, and then 6 years later June. Yeah. And we lived in that area most of the time, in that same neighborhood most of the time. Callaway Mills were there, and Daddy was working with Callaway Mills, and for a couple of years we moved back to Alabama for him, not for me, but back to Alabama where he grew up, and he tried his hand at farming, and that was very difficult for a small farmer to make it back in those days, and so things weren't all that great. So he ended up coming back to LaGrange. I do remember the house that they built in Alabama, kind of in the country, it seemed like. I have vague memories because I guess we moved, I was about maybe 4 or 5 years old, the years we were there. And I remember one thing about the house was my mother would make us peanut candy by a big old fireplace, in the fireplace. She'd make a big fire in the fireplace. And I somehow remember the candy, and I think it was made from like maple syrup or some kind of syrup and peanuts that she cooked on the fire.
Kind of like a maple peanut brittle kind of thing?
Yeah, it was so good. It wasn't brittle like brittle, but it was
chewy
good.
kind of maple.
Yes. And the other thing I remember was walking to school. I was really too young for first grade, but there was a big old rock school. It was a one-room school, and I remember going with my brother, and I guess my sister too, tagging along with them to school, and we were all in the one-room school. So that was sort of my kindergarten, and I could listen into all the grades, and I learned a lot. I think I got a really good start in education from doing that. And then when we moved back to LaGrange, and I started first grade there, so I went through all the grades actually in LaGrange. But I enjoyed school. I always liked school, and I remember when I was 6 years old, I took piano lessons. The piano teacher came to the school, and you had to pay for it, so it wasn't free, but I'm sure it wasn't a whole lot. And I took piano that year, and then in the second grade, I remember the teacher said, "Does anyone know how to play piano?" And I raised my hand because they were starting a tonette band, but they wanted one person to play the accordion. So she said that I could go get an accordion at the band area. And I was so excited. After school, I ran all the way to the band house, which was through the park and in the woods. They had the Callaway Band house. And I got my little 12 bass accordion. And so I played that from second grade on up for a good while. And then by the time I got to the fifth grade, I kind of liked the saxophone. And so I started playing the saxophone then. But starting at first grade also, they did have dancing in the schools. They came to the school to teach tap dancing, ballet, all kinds of dancing, and that was part of the Callaway Educational Association doing that. Because of the Callaways, I got a really great education with lots of extra things. It wasn't so good for the workers in the mills. They did not have it that great, but Callaway did provide a lot of special things for the children.
Mm-hmm.
And the dancing was one of my very favorite things that they had. But there was a Callaway Educational Association building that we call the CEA building that everybody enjoyed going to for all kinds of activities. And they had people working there that helped you, and it was just a great atmosphere. And they had teams for tennis and swimming and diving and all kinds of things like that, sports, and I was on the dive team, and most favorite, I was on the synchronized swimming team. I liked that best of all.
Wow.
Synchronized swimming was so much fun.
Like dancing in the water.
Yes, and like I remember once we did a program at night where they turned out all the lights and we were holding candles and swimming and in formations and all that was just to me it's just really beautiful dancing in the water.
Yeah. Wow.
So I enjoyed that a lot. I didn't like the speed swimming. I didn't care much for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good place to grow up for me because I did have a lot of advantages. All the instruments were furnished for the children, so I was I checked out that accordion that I played, could check out the saxophone that I played, and I played whatever other instrument that I might want to play, and I also played in a little dance band when I got to be a teenager. We had a little group that played, and they took us to just a few specialty places. I know one of the places we went to with not only the band but the dancing was Warm Springs, because back in that period of time there were a lot of people, a lot of children as well as adults, who had polio, and they were in iron lungs.
Oh,
So we would go down for programs, and they would wheel those big old iron lungs into a room, and then also some people who were not in the iron lungs, and then we would entertain and do a show for them.
Wow.
And there was also a lot of dance recitals. So every year we put on a big recital. They had like a seamstress. Her full-time job was making costumes, beautiful costumes.
Wow.
And so you would go and be fitted for your costume, and I mean it was really beautiful, gorgeous. So that was one of the most fun things that I did. I loved the dancing, and I especially loved tap dancing. But I did a little bit of ballet and a little bit of toe as well.
Mm-hmm. So you had an opportunity to study dancing that was one of your options, right?
It was when I graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
I got a scholarship to any accredited college in the world, full scholarship.
Through the
But
Callaway Foundation?
yes,
Or, wow.
it was a Callaway scholarship. They gave about, I don't know, maybe about 5 scholarships. I think
Mm-hmm.
probably every year. I don't know, but I
Was it an
remember.
academic scholarship based on grades, or was it?
I think it was all around.
Okay,
I
because
think
you were
it was
involved
a
in so
lot.
many different
Yeah,
things.
I think a lot of it was based on grades, and then once you got to that point, because we had a really good school system,
Mm-hmm.
and beyond that, I'm sure they had other criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But I had an opportunity. They wanted me to, since I had done the dancing so much, they said, if you will go to LaGrange College, we will send you to New York City to be trained in dance there, and then you would come back and teach dance to the people here at Callaway.
Oh, wow.
And so I really would love to have done that, but I was not. I was too young and naive for New York City.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little frightening
Yeah.
for me.
You weren't comfortable with going to New York.
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't do
So
that.
where did you end up going?
I went for 2 years to GSCW, Georgia State College for Women, which is just for women, and studied music and dance. They had a wonderful dance program there, but it was mostly jazz. I was
Mm-hmm.
not I was not comfortable with that for a while. I mean, that was so different from. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
very. I don't know exactly the words you use, but anyway, it's not. It's not
Very
precise.
different from
Yeah,
tap and
yeah, it's not
ballet.
precise. It's
Yeah.
tap and ballet is very precise.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz was much more flowing and whatever you wanted to do, kind of.
Okay.
Although there was, there were
Mm-hmm.
particular programs that we did, and it was fun. I loved it, but it still was not the same thing that I had been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I did dance from the first grade through my sophomore year in college, and then I
So
transferred.
where was that school?
It was in Milledgeville,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
and then I transferred to the University of Georgia for my last 2 years as a bachelor's degree, and I did band. So I concentrated on the music there. They didn't have dance.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my degree in music education
Mm-hmm.
and became a band director.
And you played in the Redcoat Band while you were
Played in
there?
the Dixie Redcoat Band while I was there.
Mm.
Yep, that was pretty nice. I had another experience that was unusual. There was a really great 100-piece men's glee club at the University of Georgia.
Hmm.
And they traveled and did a lot of wonderful programs, but the director invited, that there were 5 different women that he would invite on occasion to go with them. All of them except me were ones who sang, and so they would sing solo specials with the men's glee club.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only one with a saxophone, but they wanted me to be a part of that men's glee club, so that was kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to go to the Ed Sullivan show, but the year after I graduated, they were invited to the Ed Sullivan show.
Oh, just
So I
missed
missed
it.
that,
Just missed it.
like
Yeah.
that. But that and I still get notices every once in a while about the men's glee club.
Really? Wow.
I still get hit junior men's glee club.
Wow.
Although it was, I don't know, I think it was probably still Brooks for that.
Mm-hmm.
But after I graduated, I got a job as a band director in Clayton County, which is Forest Park. I had all the bands in the county, the junior high and the elementary school bands, and I had to go in and pull together a group of students and teach them how to play the instruments and do the whole thing.
Wow.
And I remember when I did my student teaching in Dublin, Georgia, the band director there, I did the same thing I did with all the elementary school and junior high bands there. He said, your first assignment is to go to all of the bands, and by the end of the first week, I want you to know everybody's name in every band, and you cannot ask anyone, what is your name?
What?
So that was a real challenge, to learn everybody's name without asking. I'm not sure how I did that, but
Yeah.
I managed somehow.
Okay. Wow.
But he was a really good director. He had done a lot of that, a lot of students.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same school, I mean, my the band office happened to be at the Forest Park High School, and so my meetings at the beginning of the school year was with the faculty at the high school there, and that's where I met David.
Mm-hmm.
He was a physics professor, physics and math, at Forest Park High School, and I would have lunch there, and I would have my office at the band room there, which was a little small building adjacent to the high school. So one day, David came over. Well, a couple of things happened. He came over. He's probably told you this story about to see if I would fix his old E-flat clarinet. Well, I didn't want to fix
E-flat
it.
soprano.
E-flat soprano
Excuse.
as it later became known. I didn't realize that. And then also he came over and he said, I can come over to where you're staying. I was living with some other teachers at Miss Harkleroad's house. Mrs. Harkleroad had a lovely home. She lived alone. She was in East Point, Georgia, which was a little ways from where I was teaching. The other teachers, my other friends there, were teaching in East Point, but I was in Forest Park. So David says, I can come over and show you an easier way to get to school. And so he came over, and he pulls out a map, spreads out this map, and he's trying to find out where I am and where he is. He had no clue. He had no clue of that. That was another map excuse.
Yes. The other excuse to
Yeah.
get to know you.
Right. But it didn't take very long, actually, that we did get together, and the rest is history.
So what was it that stood out to you that differentiated him from, he said that you had two other boyfriends with Corvettes.
That's true.
And so what differentiated him
Well,
from the
actually,
others?
as my daddy would say, he was American. I brought home first, the guy was Greek,
Okay.
and then the second one was Jewish. And my daddy said, aren't there any Americans at that school? But I really liked the fact that he was singing and doing a revival. Mm-hmm. And he took me to a revival. I thought that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And that was probably one of the main things there.
Yeah. He has a beautiful voice.
Yes, I liked his singing.
Mm-hmm. And you're a music person, so
yes,
there you
so
go.
That worked.
There you go.
That worked well.
Yeah.
And then the next year you were born.
Yeah.
My first little baby, and it was a girl. And the first thing I did was I looked to see if you had a dimple. And you had one dimple on the left side, which I have one dimple on the left side. And I said, okay, I'll keep her.
Phew. That's a good thing.
I know.
Just got.
So yeah, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that once you're married and you have a baby, you can't really do all the night rehearsals, the afternoon rehearsals, the weekend concerts that you do when you're a band director.
Makes it hard.
Because I had a lot of those that I had done just that first year. And so I stayed at home with you to just take care of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then about February, that was November, then I don't know, maybe about February of the second year, when you were like maybe 16 months old, I got a call wanting me to take over for a teacher who had assigned parts for an operetta. But then her husband was transferred and they moved. And she was a fifth grade teacher. So would I come and finish the year and teach fifth grade and do this operetta? Well, they knew I had a music background. This is from someone at church had told them that. But it didn't matter that I knew nothing about teaching fifth grade. They hired me right off the bat because I could do the operetta for them.
Oh, okay.
And that was a challenge too, to come in at the middle of the year and have an operetta already assigned,
Mm-hmm.
and yet have to carry that out and also teach the fifth grade. And one thing I found out in teaching the fifth grade class was that there was a wide variance in whether or not a child could read. And I found out that those who could read could do well in almost all the subjects. And those who had a lot of trouble reading, they had trouble in everything.
Mm.
Which is going to lead later on to how I changed my emphasis when we went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow or other, I knew that I wanted to get a doctorate. I don't know where that came from, but that was one of my projections. I just
Life goals, kind of.
Yeah, that was just something I knew that I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's exactly what we tried to do as soon as we could.
Did you know you wanted to teach at the college level?
I don't know that I had thought even through that far. I just knew I wanted to get that education.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I guess I skipped over. Yes, I skipped over one kind of interesting part. Maybe your daddy told you about when we got married. The first night we didn't have any money. So the first night we stayed in his daddy's house in Fitzgerald on the way to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was there.
Okay.
His daddy was gone and anyway, we stayed there that night. And then the next night we did stay in a hotel, and then the rest of the vacation was at his mother's house with everybody there. I mean, the rest of the honeymoon with everybody there. And that Sunday, his mother had talked us into singing a duet at church. Well, we had never sung a duet.
Oh.
Period. And I'm way too easy, to please somebody. If someone insists that I do something, I try to do it. And so David can sing, so that's not a problem. So we got up that church. It was like the next day. This is on our honeymoon. The preacher got up and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, who got married last night, are going to sing a duet." Well, David's mother's last name at that time was Lewis, so that's how we got the name of Lewis. And we had been married a little bit more than last night.
Yeah.
But, during that first week.
Yeah.
The other trip we made to Florida that was kind of quick was while I was pregnant with you. David said he's got to get a job that pays better. And so his mother got him a job teaching at the high school in Pompano Beach, Florida, which was near where she lived in Fort Lauderdale. So off we go with our worldly possessions in a little U-Haul trailer and driving 2 cars down to Florida. And when we got down to, and I'm 6 months pregnant or more, when we got down to Florida, David's mother said, "Max Ragland has been trying to call you all the time, and he can't get you." Before cell phones, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to call. He said, "You need to call him back immediately." So David called Max, and Max said, "We have a job for you at Southern Tech." Southern Technical Institute was a branch of Georgia Tech, and a bit, a nice big pay raise compared to high school teaching. So we didn't unpack that little U-Haul. We just turned the cars around and headed back to Georgia. We had no place to stay, and I'm sort of pregnant, and so our friends, the Cofields, Peggy and Robert Cofield, gave us their bed, and they slept on the sofa or the floor. I don't know what they did, but we stayed with them for about a week until we could get our little apartment, which was a garage apartment, a garage behind a house in the Atlanta area. And it had, the man that lived in the house was a bus driver. And so he had made little bus windows, put little bus windows all around that house, so that we had little bus windows, and it was kind of an open floor plan before that was
Studio.
popular.
Yeah.
And I remember making little curtains to go on those little bus windows, and I sewed little curtains to go around the sink, at the base of the sink, and getting that thing all decorated up so you could be born there, and you were. But the night that
that was near Peachtree DeKalb Airport, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And the night that I had to go to the hospital with you, I was trying to teach David how to direct, because he was going to be leading the singing that Sunday at church. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed. I had been crawling around the floor cutting out a bathrobe for David, and a big old bathrobe. And so I'd been crawling all over the floor doing that, and it was delivery time. I might have been thinking that you were going to wait until maybe the 10th, but close to the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that night, while I was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to teach him, we were going over this over and over, my water broke.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end of that. And the robe never got sewed up. We probably somewhere still have that. Yeah, folded up somewhere with the pattern. He never got that bathrobe though.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was. Then you came.
And not born at home. You were born at home. I was not.
You were born in the hospital.
In Piedmont Hospital.
Yep. That's right.
Yep.
You remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good. And when I was growing up, in addition to having a big garden, we had a cow named Bessie, and we had some chickens, and the chickens laid eggs, and you brought the cow in to milk. You took to the yard. The cow. Everybody had cows in the neighborhood, and they took their cow down to the cow pasture at night, and they stayed there at night. And I guess the next morning you went down to the cow pasture, and your cow knew when you called her to come, and you would bring her back home and milk the cow. I didn't do any of that, but my mother would milk the cow and churn butter and buttermilk.
Wow.
And it was all wonderful. And if there were people who didn't have that, Mother would usually always have some that she would give to people who didn't have it. And the same way with the gardens. But I do remember that she would occasionally kill a chicken for Sunday dinner. And I would hide in the house, but she would catch it. You have to catch the chicken first, and then she would tie a string around their feet. It sounds really terrible, but we eat chickens.
Yeah.
And she would tie the chickens up by their feet to the clothesline, and take a sharp knife and chop off their heads, and then they drain the blood, and then she would pluck the feathers and clean them. Wow. And skin the chicken. And I mean, it was not as easy as going to the store and buying your nice chicken, boneless, skinless chicken breast.
No.
But
Or your $4.99 Sam's
rotisserie
rotisserie
chicken.
chicken.
That's true.
We're spoiled.
It was a little bit harder
Yeah.
back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But we ate vegetables, I would say, most of the week
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and we would eat, mostly meat on the weekend. So we had a really healthy diet
Mm-hmm.
because it was all fresh vegetables and
Yep.
a little bit of meat here and there.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That was kind of fun though to to experience that, just a little bit of that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a dog named Tippy,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a little bulldog that you had to cut their tail off.
Oh.
I remember when I would always hide in the house again too, because they're supposed to have the little short tails.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when my daddy and brother, I guess, went down to the barn to chop off the tail, Tippy's tail.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I remember about him.
Talk about what you remember about growing up with two older siblings. I know you mentioned that you were 6 years younger than Billy,
Mhm.
and 9 years younger than Mary Alice.
Yes. So I wasn't like really close to them to do things with them like children who are closer in age together.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a couple of my memories. And I don't know if I actually, I don't think I actually remembered. I think they're probably stories that were told.
Mm-hmm.
But one was a story that was told was that Billy was pushing me around the house in a stroller, and I was crying, and Mama was trying to cook supper and everything, and that's when she had him pushing me through it with a stroller. And suddenly, from all my crying, suddenly there was no sound at all. She goes in to check on it, and Billy has his hand over my mouth and nose. So that's just a little memory of that. I guess I tried to do things with Billy and his friends when I got a little bit older. They were playing like cowboy and Indians all the time with their little guns and so forth. And I can remember sort of trying to chase after them and play with them, and they didn't like that. Billy didn't like that at all. And I don't know, Mary Alice, being 9 years older, and I don't recall doing that many things with her. I can't remember that, but I know that when she was 22, she was working in an office, and she started feeling really tired a lot. And so she decided to go to a different doctor, not our Dr. O'Neill, the good family doctor who knew everyone so well. And she said, I'm going to go to somebody new and see if I can get a really good checkup. And she went to a doctor, and it happened to be on a night when I had a dance recital. And the doctor, as soon as he checked her, he said, I'd like for you to go into the hospital tonight, right now. And she said, oh, can I wait till tomorrow? My sister has a dance recital. So he said, okay, you can go into the hospital tomorrow. But I do remember that night, my parents got out the big old, we had a big medical book, dictionary or big medical book of some kind, and they were looking things up, and it was very solemn time, and it turned out that she had leukemia. And this was in 1951, maybe, early 50s, and they didn't really know what to do. They just pretty much put poison in your system. And so she lived almost 2 years, but she went from just feeling a little bit tired to being really, really sick because they pretty much put poison in the veins, trying to kill all the white blood cells, and that's pretty much all they knew to do at that period of time. Nowadays, fortunately, leukemia is frequently one that can be controlled or cured.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that she loved to buy things for me, though. She had a job, and she would want to buy pretty clothes at the really nice stores in town. And I do remember honestly, after she died, I know my parents, during those 2 years that she lived, it was never discussed in our house. It was never talked about at all. Never.
Never talked about that she had leukemia?
Yes.
You didn't know she had leukemia?
Oh, yeah. I knew
You
she had
knew?
leukemia. I knew she was really sick, but that conversation was never discussed.
Yeah.
And I wish now that it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
It was just one of those situations where it was like nothing was done. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, she was in and out of the hospital a good bit with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, that was like a really sad time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember that after she died, my parents, mother would pick flowers. She always grew a lot of flowers in the yard, really pretty flowers, and she would take flowers over to the cemetery every single day.
Wow.
She took fresh flowers
Mm.
and went over. So it was, it was a really difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
For sure,
Yeah.
for the parents.
Yeah, you could see the grief of your
Yeah,
parents.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So how did you and Billy handle it? I'm sure you were sad and cried that you lost your sister.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yes, of course, and it was just a tragic time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that my family showed emotion that much with, openly.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the grief was kind of buried.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not,
Yeah.
but I think that's just the way a lot of people
Yeah.
handled it with other children around. So,
Right. They didn't want to
yeah,
bring that all onto y'all.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, as you grew up and moved away, did you come back and see your parents a lot and your brother? Did you travel back to LaGrange often? I know you stayed in Georgia.
We stayed in
mostly,
Georgia.
so
Yeah,
it was not
we
far
were in
away.
Georgia, so yeah,
Right, so you could probably see them
We
even
did.
for a day trip or
we did, and
whatever.
and my parents were so good to help us. They had a big garden. This was a big thing. Their whole big backyard
Mm-hmm.
was a wonderful garden, and they always brought us fresh vegetables and canned vegetables and everything. So they kept us in really good food.
Mm.
My mother was a wonderful seamstress. So I always had beautiful clothes, even though we didn't have a lot of money. I still had like really pretty clothes because she could make anything.
Mm-hmm.
And she made the adorable little things for you, little children's clothes and little gowns and all kinds of things.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, was that part of what you remember? I mean, we talked about your school and all of the different arts you were involved in and all, but
Yeah.
what about the garden? Did you work out in the garden?
Yes, I
and-
loved the garden, and I remember picking green beans and picking peas and picking okra. I loved fried okra.
Mhm.
So yeah, having everything in the garden was wonderful. And mother more so than daddy. I spent more time with my mother. Daddy worked a lot, and mother stayed home. So she and I did a lot of things together. I remember whether we were washing dishes together, she would wash and I would dry, or if we were making up the bed together, or sometimes just at night when we were in the bed or whatever, in separate beds, but in the same room sometimes, we would do Bible verses, and we would see how many. We would each say a Bible verse that you'd memorize back and forth, and
Wow.
see how far we could go
Mm-hmm.
with Bible verses. And so I knew a lot of Bible verses.
Mm-hmm.
She read a lot of Bible stories to me, and I thought they were very scary. A lot of Bible stories were scary.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like some of them, but
Things like you know, the Pharaoh was mean to Moses, and all the
yeah,
plagues, and some of the,
yeah.
especially
Joseph, you
the,
know, was thrown in the well, and
yeah,
it just
all,
there was just a lot of
and
scary things going
Jonah
on. Yeah, and
getting swallowed by a whale.
exactly. I just thought as a little girl that it seemed a bit scary
Yeah,
for all those Bible verses.
yeah.
But we read them, and I do remember that at the when I was first growing up, younger, there was no Christian church, and I went to the Baptist church. My parents had been going to the Christian church when they were growing up in Alabama. So the young people from Atlanta Christian College came down to start a new church in LaGrange, and they met first of all in the homes, different homes. So sometimes they would meet in our living room, and sometimes in somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of really fun to get to know the young people coming down for starting the churches.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up building a church there, so that was nice.
Mm-hmm. I remember Mama and Granddaddy being
Very active.
very active, and Mama,
Yeah.
I remember going to Vacation Bible School with Mama.
Oh yeah.
Were you involved in Vacation Bible School as well with her?
No, and I should have been though, because I don't remember that, but I got a letter sometime back from someone who said, "Are you, were you June Brooks from LaGrange?" And they said, because I used to go to LaGrange to visit my grandparents every summer, and I always I was taught in Bible school by Ms. Brooks, and everybody just loved her so much.
Oh yeah.
And she was so wonderful, and that
Mhm.
was her favorite part of every summer, was getting to go to Vacation Bible School, and it was my mother who was teaching her. So that I thought that was
That's
a really,
neat. Yeah.
really sweet note to get from out of the blue.
Wow. I wonder how she found you.
I don't know. I don't know how she found me, and it turns out that she married a Ewing. Her name is Bunny Ewing,
Oh.
and
Hmm.
I've got a note from someone recently with a note with one of her notes, and she mentioned again about, and this was like last week.
Oh wow.
She mentioned again about my mother teaching her, and about her going to LaGrange, and she said that her grandmother and I were played saxophone together in the band.
Oh.
So I need to reach out to her again.
Yeah.
That was just a really sweet story.
Yeah. That's neat.
Yeah, that dates back to my mama.
Mm-hmm.
The half year that I taught in the 5th grade class to take over for the teacher who had just assigned an operetta was in Smyrna Elementary School, which is kind of interesting because that's where Cheryl's teaching right now.
Right.
So I can't even
That's
begin to
funny.
describe
Yeah.
how unusual that would be.
Yeah. 60 years later.
Yeah, how you ended up there.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But after that, we decided to go back to graduate school. David was going to start first, and I was going to work and teach so that he could, so that we would have an income. And so he started at the University of Georgia in the graduate program there. And I taught, since I had a half year's experience in fifth grade. I quickly got a job as a fifth grade teacher, and I taught in the schools there. There was one other young teacher, I was young back then, who was teaching in that school, and she and I sort of got together, and she was going to teach art to my fifth grade class, and I was going to teach music to her fourth grade class because we didn't have music teachers and art teachers, and so we were going back and forth doing that. And I also realized that some of my students couldn't read much at all, just like in the half year that I taught at Smyrna. And some could read anything I was reading and did. They wanted to know what I was reading so they could check that out. And yet we all had a fifth grade book. Some could read it, some could not. So we decided that we were going to try something. The principal said we could. And the fourth grade teacher had moved here from New York, and her old school system was getting rid of a lot of their reading program. And so we asked if we could have all their reading books. So they sent all their reading books. All we had to do was pay the shipping, and the school agreed to do that. And we tried to do individualized reading, where you tried to figure out what level a person could be successful and give them that level book, and so on, which is a really hard thing to do, even if you've got a lot of training with it. But we did a pretty decent job, I think, of helping get students books that they could read and teach them from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of an unusual but nice program. And the next year, I got a research assistantship to go ahead and start my graduate work, and David got a teaching assistantship, so we could both go to school. And you were still little. You were like 2, 3, and 4, and we had a maid who came to the house, and she was really, really sweet and wonderful and took care of you while we were teaching, and working and studying. And so I guess the one fun thing that you loved to do was we would take you to the zoo, the Athens Zoo, and the park there, and we would feed the ducks and walk through the zoo and picnic. So those were things that we could do without spending money, and it was fun to do, and we were out and about.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good.
Yeah.
And actually, we decided to go straight on through for our doctoral program, and we did. We made it. We both got our degrees together.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we also got a job teaching at Georgia Southwestern State University here in Americus. So we came to, back up. We got pregnant as soon as our time was about up at the school, at the University of Georgia. I got pregnant with our son Brad, and so he kind of went to graduate school that whole 9 months, because 9 days after graduation he was born. And 9 days after he was born, we moved to Americas. So that was kind of a difficult, challenging time to do all that while you're finishing up your degrees and writing your dissertations. And at the time, we were still trying to finish our dissertations. We had someone typing them for us. But then when we left Athens before we finished that, so we had to start over, and we could find no one to type our dissertations in Americas. So David bought this.
And there was no computer
There's no
like
computer.
we have now.
No,
that you would just
no.
type it up and
There,
edit and all of that.
Yeah, footnotes, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so David bought me an old, reconditioned Underwood typewriter, electric typewriter, and every time I'd write an O, for the most part, it would cut a hole in the paper.
Oh no!
You have to start over. So it was an interesting and challenging time, but I ended up having to type both dissertations.
Wow!
While nursing a baby.
Oh.
And starting a new life in a new community.
A new teaching career.
And a new teaching career. That's right. So I don't know how we survived that first year or so. Actually, you had a hard time that first year, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm.
You would be starting first grade because there's 6 years between you and Brad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like my brother and me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't travel to come down and find a place for us to live, a house to rent. So David and his mama came down and found found a house,
Mm-hmm.
and went ahead and registered you in the school that was nearby, and told them that we would be a week late coming because I was waiting to give birth. And when we got here and he took you to school, they said, oh no, she's no longer registered. She wasn't here at the first, so we took her name off. And they wouldn't let you go to school there. Well, he said, what are we supposed to do? Well, you'll have to take her across town to another school. And across town to the other school was a little tiny red schoolhouse, a little red house behind the big schoolhouse where first grade was being taught, and it used to be a Civil War hospital, that building. And Cheryl would not stay. David took her over there, and she would not stay. She would scream and cry, and he would have to bring her home. And then when you take her back the next day, the same thing. She was crying. She wouldn't let him leave. He should bring her back home. So then the school called and said, got to leave her at school. She can't not come to school. So he took her to school and he said to the teacher, no, actually he said first to Cheryl, if I teach your class, will you stay? And for some strange reason, Cheryl said yes. And so he asked the teacher if it would be okay if he taught the class one day so you would stay. And she was happy to have somebody come in and teach, especially a man, which is unusual in an elementary school.
Yeah.
And so he worked and prepared to figure out what he was going to teach to the first graders. And he taught the class, and you stayed. And from then on, you stayed at school. So that was a good thing.
Yeah.
And he loved it, by the way. Did he tell you this story?
No.
Well, what he likes to tell about the story is after he finished teaching that class, a bunch of the little children came, running up and hugging on him and stuff. And one little girl looked up at him, though, and she says, I don't like you. I love you. So he liked that story a lot.
Yeah, that's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in Americus and you have this baby and you have finished your dissertations. So what do you want to tell about your career or how long did you stay in the rental that your mother-in-law picked out?
We were there about 6 months. Brad was a baby, and it was kind of hard because it was hard for me to unpack all the boxes. Mother and Daddy came down as soon as they could, to come down and unpack and try to get us furniture and stuff as much as possible to get us settled in. And but they were working at the time as well, because mother started teaching sewing at Singer after I left to go to college. She said stayed at home with the children until then. But we had, I do remember that one of the first things that we had was this tiny little poodle called Peppy. He was a phantom poodle, which was just so sweet. And that was our first little dog. And he kind of came with Brad. Not exactly with him, but at the same time.
Yeah, that Christmas.
So, yeah. And then I started teaching the reading courses. I had gotten my degree in reading. When I went back to get the degree, I was advised not to continue in music because it is so hard once you're married to find, like, there's usually one band director in a town. So if my husband was going to a particular town, if he got a job there, the likelihood of there being a job for a band director was slim. And so they kind of geared me in the reading area. And one of the first graduate classes I took was Diagnosis and Correction of Reading Disabilities. And I really liked that a lot. I saw from my vast experience teaching fifth grade that that was what was needed. The children needed help in, they needed to be diagnosed to see what the problem was, and then have some corrective procedures so that they could do better. And so I continued in that reading field, and that was my specialty. And so when I started teaching here, I also decided to open up a clinic at the school for free for children who needed help. And I would diagnose and do some corrective work with them. Also found out that there were a lot of college students who had a lot of trouble reading and studying. And so I wrote a grant that turned out to be the largest grant that the school had ever received at that time to open up and develop a program for college students. And it was called a Reading and Language Study Skills program. So I hired some people to come in and I directed that program. They didn't give me the salary for directing it because, we had a salary of $25,000 for the year, 12-month salary. And they wouldn't give me that much. They would give me only $15,000 for the total year, since I didn't bring in somebody from outside. Because that would have been my regular salary, my regular teaching salary, and they weren't going to put me above my regular teaching salary, so that when I came out of that grant program, I wouldn't be making more than I normally would make. So they ended up sending back every year $10,000.
What?
Yes. They couldn't use it for anything except salary. They sent back, rather than give that to me.
I can't believe they did that.
And I've had the comptroller, years later, the comptroller asked me, he said, I was just looking back over some things. Why did we send $10,000 back from that grant program that you wrote? And I explained why they did. Wow. So I directed that program for 3 years, and it was really good. The college president at that time didn't think it was all that important to have something for college students. Of course, they knew how to read and study. Well, it turns out that his son later on ended up needing to come to our reading study skills program. And he realized by then that it was something that was needed.
Right.
We also got a building built out of that. The building that turned out, I had the whole building at first, and then when the end of that program, into that grant, the 3-year grant, we made it the whole education building, and the education department and the history department, and part of the psychology department was housed in that building and taught their classes there. In fact, that building was used as it started out being a temporary building, but it was used until about maybe 5 years ago.
Wow.
So it was used for 40, 50 years.
Wow.
And that was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
I also had some really great opportunities to go to um, speak at some conferences. Like I went, I was invited to speak at a conference in Los Angeles, California, and Louise Verlaine, you remember
Mm-hmm.
Louise and I both went out there to that meeting, and the president of another organization that was mainly in the Northeast heard me and invited me after that to come to give a program at their meeting the next year in Washington, D.C., which I did, and that was the College Reading Association, and was a smaller organization. It was not a national. I mean, it was a national group, but it was not the international, big,
Mm-hmm.
huge group. However, it was mainly men, and it was mainly those from Philadelphia, New York, Washington D.C., the
Mm-hmm.
Boston, that kind of area, and they weren't sure they wanted to accept a woman, and especially one from the South.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, you're going to have to prove yourself. They literally put me through a lot of questioning and the whole 9 yards before they accepted me. And then once they accepted me, though, it was really good. And I ended up being the executive secretary of that organization for many years, and they kept wanting me to be president, but I didn't want to be president. The executive secretary kind of ran the thing. They were in charge. I mean, it was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it, and I got to know all the people really well. And so I got to travel to conferences, mainly in the D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston type area. They seldom met anywhere in the. One time after that, they met in Atlanta, but the rest of the time it was pretty much up in the Northeast. But they finally talked me into to running for president after I got pushed and pushed and pushed. So I was the vice president and then the president of the College Reading Association. And then I was invited to speak at the World Congress of Reading. And the first one I went to, I think, at the World Congress of Reading, one was in Sweden, in Stockholm. And that was the first time my luggage, I think it's the only time my luggage has not arrived. But I had to speak in Stockholm, and we got there. I had no luggage. We had to go to a big welcoming party that the city of Stockholm was holding for our group for the World Congress. And it was in the same place that they give the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, wow.
And the King of Sweden was there, and there was a big dance. It was a big to-do. I had no clothes except the ones I wore over, which was a pair of white pants, white tennis shoes, kind of a bulky slip-over sweater that had a big sailboat on the front. And I did have some clean underwear in my carry-on, so I took a good bath and I had clean underwear, and I put my clothes back on, and I went to that party, and I had the most fun of anyone there. I just pretended that I was just as dressed up as anybody else there. And I danced quite a bit with the man who was the king's tennis partner. He was an interesting guy, older guy.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of fun to meet the people there and to see that you don't have to be all dressed up. It's
all about attitude.
It's all about your attitude, your state of mind.
Yeah.
Then I was invited to speak at the World Congress of Reading in Maui, yes, in Hawaii. That was kind of fun. That was, I believe, after the time that I met you, though.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I can't remember if it was before or after. But anyway, in Maui, and that was one other person from Georgia Southwestern went to that too, so that was kind of nice. The thing that I remember, other than just it was really a fun experience being in Hawaii and at a beautiful hotel. We did go to a luau. I remember they had a luau for us, and I also remember that when we first got there, the guy who met us at the hotel was this black guy to carry your bags, and he said, "Where are you from?" And we said, "Georgia." And he said, "Oh, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia." He said, "I came over here X number of years ago, and I liked it so much. I said, I'm never leaving this island. Send me my stuff." So he
Wow.
had them literally to send him his clothes and everything. He was not leaving. He said, "I
Wow.
love it." So that to me that just kind of stood out as
Mhm.
a pretty interesting thing in Maui.
Mhm.
And I also was invited to speak at the World Congress of Reading in Australia.
Wow.
And I guess those are the three of the big speaking engagements there, except for Taiwan. I had to give the graduation address at Kaohsiung Teachers College in Taiwan because our president of the university was supposed to go and give the address. He could not go at the last minute because of something that had come up. And so he asked me if I would go and give the
Wow.
graduation address. The Georgia Southwestern singers um, were performing at that graduation, and he was to be the graduation speaker. So on the way over there, I sat by a young man who was from Taiwan, and I asked him to teach me how to say some greetings, a little bit
Mhm.
of greetings and all that. And so I was able to greet people in the language. And it turned out that everywhere I went, the mayor also went. The mayor and I were called up to the microphone to give greetings to wherever we were.
Mhm.
And so I was able, each place we went, to give greetings in the language to
Mhm.
start with, which was impressed people somewhat. And I did the same thing at the graduation address. How I
Mhm.
started and I ended using their language, and then in the middle
Mhm.
I spoke English
Yeah.
and had a translator for that.
Okay. That's
There's
actually, you mentioned that you didn't really want to come to Americas.
Well, David came to me one day and said, "Oh, we have an interview with Dr. King, who's president of Georgia Southwestern." And I said, "Where is that?" He said, "In Americus, Georgia." And I said, "Where is that?" And he said, "Well, it sits down in South Georgia." And I said, "Oh, I'm not going down there." And he said, "Well, I've already told him we'd come." And I said, "Well, I'm not going." And he said, "It'll only take 1 hour. You can go for 1 hour." And so finally I said, "Well, okay, for 1 hour." And we came down and met with Dr. King, who was the president of Georgia Southwestern. And then we met a lot of other people as well. And the people were so nice and warm and friendly. And they really wanted us to come. They were just starting to change Georgia Southwestern from a 2 year to a 4 year institution at that time. So we would be able to help develop the programs, write the programs for that new expansion of the university. Our other main choice for a job was at Emory University in Atlanta. Emory University had the prestige and so forth in a big city, but we would be walking into an established program, just teaching the class whatever classes they needed there, and we kind of had to um, draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper and put pros and cons for Georgia Southwestern, Emory University. The fact that we had almost 2 children, Cheryl was little and Brad was about to be born, um, made us lean toward a small town rather than the big city, and being able to develop programs rather than walk into a situation that was already well established was appealing as well. So we ended up in Americas. One of our good friends early on was Brown Hodges and his wife Jenny. And I recall one thing that Brown said to us, which I thought was very strange. He said, because we like to travel and he liked to stay home. And he said, there's no need for me to leave Sumter County. He said, sooner or later, everyone comes to Sumter County. And I thought, sure that's true. Well, another interesting friend that we met after we came was Jimmy Carter. He was, at the time, he had come back home and he was running for senator, I believe, politically. And he was such a nice person and so good and kind. I didn't think that I didn't want him to go into politics, especially when he decided to run for governor. Because I said, everybody I know in politics is like, how can it help me instead of how can it help other people? And he was not that kind of person, so I hated to see him go into politics. But it was kind of interesting later on as he ran for president. Literally, everyone came to Sumter County, and especially after he was nominated for the president. I mean, we had people from just about every country come here. We had dignitaries from all of the major national news networks. We had movie stars, just, everyone came to Sumter County. It did remind me of Brown Hodges' comments with that. But the other thing that really brought a lot of people to Sumter County was Habitat for Humanity. And Millard and Linda Fuller, who turned out to be some of our very best friends, started they had become millionaires and they started a program, gave everything away, and started a program to help people who needed a home, because they found out that was the main thing that people needed to succeed, was to have a decent place to live. And so many people in the U.S. and in the world did not have that. They came through Koinonia, another interesting place in this area, in order to do that. But we met them at church and started helping volunteer with them to spread the word. They wanted to start building houses, and people had to pay sweat equity by helping to work on the house and get friends to do the same. And then they had to pay for the house, though there was no profit. And so made it reasonable for people who couldn't afford housing and who couldn't afford to get a loan from a bank, didn't have enough income to have a home. And that was a really wonderful.
So it was no interest loans.
Yeah, right. And so that was a really meaningful part of what we did outside of our teaching for many years, in going around and helping start habitat programs in different parts of the country. And then I'm working on projects helping to build houses for people too. So we started that from the ground floor with Linda and Millard, from house one all the way up to housing millions of people over the years.
So what's the name of that organization?
Habitat for Humanity. And later, they also established the Fuller Center for Housing, which is what we're most involved in now in helping with the Fuller Center. But people came from everywhere to help with volunteering and building houses. And that was just a wonderful program as well. But after Jimmy, well, we haven't gotten Jimmy in the White House yet, have we? When Jimmy Carter started running for president, I got involved at that time in helping him and helping with the Democratic Committee. So they asked me to be on the Democratic Committee and work through that. And I remember at one point, after Jimmy won the presidency and had come back home, we got him involved in Habitat, and he agreed to, though he wasn't on the board of any other organization, he did agree to be on the board of Habitat for Humanity and to do a 1 week a year build, Jimmy Carter Work Project. And the very first one of those was in New York City, the Lower East Side. And Cheryl went with us on that build. We all got in a bus, like a Greyhound bus, I think it was.
Our school bus.
Some kind of bus.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like 40 plus people on the bus with Jimmy Carter and Rosalind. And we rode on the bus from Americus to New York City. Through the night, the bus rode, I remember, because early in the morning, we were coming into Washington, D.C. to stop on the way to New York, just for a breakfast stop. But we stopped at the bus station. And that was kind of interesting because Jimmy had kind of gone around and sat with different people during the bus trip, visiting with people. And he happened to be sitting with me as we were coming into Washington, D.C. And I remember he said, well, June, this is such and such a building. And then that's such and such a building. And he, was naming all these different places. And then he said, I don't know exactly what that is. He said, I've never entered DC from this vantage. And I was thinking, right, you've been coming in on, you've been flying in on
the presidential plane.
Presidential plane, yeah. Air
Force
Force One. So that was kind of funny sounding. And we were sitting there in the bus station having breakfast early morning, and it was amazing to see the people heads kind of turn, because it hadn't been that long since he was out of the White House. And he shocked a lot of people in the Washington, D.C. bus station that morning.
That's for sure.
So after breakfast, we drove on to New York City, and we were staying in Hell's Kitchen area. It was a church building that we were, the basement of a church that they were letting us stay. There's sort of some interesting stories about that, but we'll deal with that another time. But that was, that was kind of fun. And one of those trips, we went on more than one trip with them, but I think that maybe in that first one, we had dinner one evening together in this Chinese restaurant. And he had everyone go around, introduce themselves. And when I introduced myself, he kind of piped up and said, "Oh, June's my boss. I was head of the Democratic Committee in Sumter County at that time, so he introduced me as his boss there, which was kind of interesting and fun. Yeah. But we had a lot of interesting times with working with Habitat through the years, and with Linda and Millard Fuller, and helping them after they were dismissed, separated from Habitat. So yeah, I was one of the first ones they called, and to go over. Linda called me to go over and help Millard because she was out of town, and she said we've just been fired, and people are calling from all over the world, and they literally were. So I was just kind of I stayed over there about almost a month, helping them get settled into something else. But we've had some, some good times and met some really interesting people. One of the things that I remember was when Jimmy Carter, when the Presidential Library was first opened, that we had a lot of people come for that, special people come that I enjoyed meeting. But through the years, I mean, I made a little book, Hanging Out with Celebrities, which has some of the pictures of a few of the people that we met throughout the years. And I didn't take a lot of pictures back then. I wish that I had taken more pictures. Like today with the camera, with the phone being your camera, we take pictures of everything. But back then, it was a real camera and real film. And so you didn't always have that available, or you didn't bother to take pictures. Or in some cases, I was just a little shy to say, "Can I take my picture with you?" kind of thing.
Yeah.
But and I sort of wish I had. And then there are pictures that I don't even know where they are that I do remember taking. I do remember seeing the pictures, but they're lost in the crowd right now.
Yep. Do you want to tell about some of the celebrities that you met? You mentioned that a lot of celebrities came through.
Well, here we are. I'm just going to kind of glance through.
Do you want me to like come over your shoulder
Sure.
to look?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you?
Page of a newspaper when we were greeting Jimmy Carter when he came home just after being nominated for president. And we had a lot of different events going on. This was one of some movie star. I don't even remember who she was. This was at the White House, though. I do remember this picture at the White House where the Carters greeted us when they were first when they were first went in for president, and I got a kiss from Jimmy, and some photographer took these pictures and sent us from the White House and sent us to them. This was a little bit later on at my birthday party, and Jimmy was there, and this was a candidate for running for governor at that time. And then this is Zbigniew Brzezinski, which I thought he was just a really interesting character that we met. Phil Donahue, the talk show host, some of you may remember, and astronaut John Glenn and his wife Annie was one of the ones that we enjoyed meeting. These were all at different events that we have been to through the years. U.S. Ambassador Andrew Young. Andrew actually came to Americas, and I had to introduce him at Georgia Southwestern, and U.S. Senator Sam Nunn was quite a popular guy. And when I was president of the College Reading Association, Alex Haley, the author of Roots, was a guest speaker, and he was very interesting. There's some interesting stories there, but I won't go into that now. The next picture really is about the movie The Bear, about Bear Bryant, and it was made in Americas. The movie was filmed in Americas, and so David and I were part of that cast. I mean, not so much so, just the extras. And then Linda and Millard went to Washington for the Points of Light, and they got this big medallion, bronze medallion on the sidewalk when they honored them along with other people for the George Bush, I think, did that, Daddy Bush. And we also met Bill Clinton a number of times, but here's when he was out campaigning once. And then with friends on a cruise. This is from the work. This is actually from the first work project. I was dressed in regular clothes that day because they needed somebody to help in the office, and I volunteered because I was having a lot of trouble with the dust. Sorry. And this was when the housing director, U.S. housing director, came to Americas dealing with Habitat for Humanity, and I was chairman of the local affiliate, so I was speaking at that time to the group. And here's when I was speaking to a conference at the College Reading Association, and some of the guys, not other ones, some of the guys who were head of that organization. And then hanging out with James Bond, actor Roger Moore. We met in Canada. He was a sponsor with Kiwanis for the program that they have to help children. So that's why we had an opportunity to have some time with him. Hanging out with Lloyd Bridges as when they were doing a movie down in Florida. We happened to run into them. And that's the end of this book, although we've met some other people through the years who've been so interesting that I wish I'd had pictures of to include or could find them when I was putting together this little book.
Tell me about when you went to Japan and how that came about and something about your trip.
Okay, in 1986, I got a call to see if I would like to go to Japan and study the Japanese language and culture. There was scholarships available for the teaching part because Japan had just become more prominent in the world, and in the past they had always had to go to other countries to learn their language. So they wanted people now to come to Japan and learn the Japanese language. So this was a special program, the first that they had, and they invited 20 people from around the world. I went and I asked David to go, and he declined because he didn't like to travel. And I got my best friend, Betty Jean Thomas, finally talked her into going. And then we went to visit daughter Cheryl, who was in Savannah working at the time and had just started a pretty new job over there. And we said, why don't you go? Because we have an available scholarship. And she said, no, I can't go. But thought about it for a while and checked and was able to get away from her job. And she went to Japan also. So this was pretty exciting. It was all done very quickly. We had to quickly get make sure our passport was okay and got the visa and headed off to Japan. We were in a town called Hakodate in Hokkaido, in the northernmost island of Japan. When we arrived, but there were lots of interesting things. We met one young lady from Texas who was on the same plane with us, and when we arrived in Japan, we met the man in charge, and he whisked us off to a spa. It was a hotel with a place for ladies to I don't know, attend a spa, I guess. We didn't know what we were doing. We just kind of went with the flow. We got there. He sent us into the place where we were supposed to get relaxation. And there were Japanese ladies there, and you take off all your clothes and pack those up in a little place and wash your hair and shampoo and bathe in a little stool sitting almost on the floor. And then we got in a hot tub and it was sort of hilarious for us. We were tired and exhausted, but we were also excited. So it was kind of a fun time for us to get in the hot tub. And then I think there was a cold tub, and then there was an herbal tub, and then there was a sauna. So by the time we did all of that, we were pretty relaxed and ready to take on the rest of Japan. So from there we went on to Hakodate, where we were to meet our host families, and all 20 of the people from different parts of the world were there, and they called out names, and your Japanese family raised their hand, and I got in the car with a man, with two men actually, and I didn't know him from anybody, but one kept turning around trying to talk to me a little bit, but didn't really speak English. I was sitting in the back seat of this van, and they had thrown my luggage in the far back, and the other one was just driving lickety split everywhere, and it looked like the driver was the one who was turned around talking, and I was very much concerned. And it was getting late, it was getting dark, and we were heading up into the mountains farther and farther, and I thought I was kind of in the twilight zone. But it turned out that the driving in Japan is on the wrong side of the road, just like England. So, so he was the one that was turned around looking at me was actually not the one driving. So it wasn't quite as dangerous as I had thought. But we got to a little house, a little pension, actually, I guess it was a pension up in the mountains, and called Niyama, two mountains, and that's where I was to live. And it was actually a ski resort in the winter, but it was summertime when we went, so it was just cows in the pasture out back and on the slopes instead of anything that looked like a snow scene. I met the family. The mama-san was pregnant. There were two little girls and 5 Japanese workers. The young ladies that worked at the pension, and one of them spoke a little bit of English, which was kind of good, but most of them didn't. But when they showed me my room, I had to climb up a ladder almost straight up to the top floor, and it was an attic. You couldn't stand up all the way in it. And I slept on this little futon on the floor, and it was a little unusual. There was no place to put all my clothes. They had 3 baskets. So I opened my big suitcase, and I had dresses and high heel shoes and everything, which I did not need, but I had. And so nothing to hang them on. So I just started putting things in baskets. So I put like all my underclothes in one basket, and my jeans and pants in one basket, and whatever, I don't know. But I had the basket system. Later they did, seeing that I had so many more clothes than they expected, they did find a portable hanging thing that I could put up there and hang some clothes on. But it was a wonderful experience, although quite unusual. I had to walk down the hill to the train station, get on the train, ride the train into Hakodate, from Niyama into Hakodate, and get off the train, walk to the bus, get on a bus, and ride to near the school and walk a little bit farther to the school. It turned out there were 10 people in the beginning class, because we had no Japanese at all. And there were 10 people in an advanced class. Some of them were from MIT and Harvard and places where they had studied Japanese and were already quite fluent. The teacher for the advanced class was a young man, and they called him Steki Sensei, which means Sensei is the teacher, but he was like a cute teacher. And we were kind of afraid to speak to him because he was with the advanced class. And it was interesting that the people that were there, most of the ones that were in the beginning class were from the U.S., I guess. But we also had some people there from France and Brazil and China and where else, Cheryl?
I don't remember.
Yeah, a number of other countries. So Canada, I think,
Canada,
was
yeah.
one. So anyway, there was a nice variety of young people there. I didn't think about it then, but John Bates, who also went in with us, and I were probably the two oldest. The Chinese lady might have been older too, but we didn't think about that. We were still pretty young. I was 48, so that was still pretty young. I did have a birthday over there. Remember, I had my 49th birthday while we were there. Is that right? Would 86 be mine? So anyway, yeah, that was a really interesting experience. We had language instruction during the day, all day. It was kind of an immersion program. We had lunch at the school, and then we had a lot of cultural activities where we met with businessmen sometimes, and we did a bonsai trip to meet with the masters of bonsai and see all of that. We had a class in flower arranging, Japanese flower arranging, and also in cooking.
Tea ceremony.
And especially tea ceremony. Yeah, that was quite wonderful. Yeah, so it was an interesting summer that we had there, and we learned as much as we could of the Japanese, but it's a difficult language. And although I still can remember the first part of my little speech at the end of it. Do you remember yours, Cheryl?
No.
1986年に私の夏休みに日本の北海道の函館へ行きました。日本語を勉強しました。日本語を面白い。でも難しいです。So that was the first part of
Wow,
my
I'm
speech.
impressed.
And then I went on to do, I forget what else. We all had to make a speech in Japanese at the end of the program. Also at the end of the program, though, I don't recall this exactly. Hiroyuki Kuno was the Steki Sensei, the young man who was teaching. We were greeting everyone and saying goodbye, and he reminded me later on that I had told him to come visit us at Georgia Southwestern, and that I would introduce him to Jimmy Carter. I have no recollection of that, but I'm sure I must have said that to him, because the next fall, after we got back home, we get a telephone call saying that, no, it must have been still in the summer, that he was arriving in Albany and that we should pick him up at the airport. And we were in Florida at this time. So I had to call a friend to go pick him up at the airport and bring him home until we could get home. And he's decided to come and study at Georgia Southwestern and also teach Japanese at the school. So he stayed with us for part of the time, and he became our Japanese son. And we still keep in touch, and he's just a really neat guy who got married and had children and still keeps in touch with us all the time for special occasions. Let's see. I think that's maybe, the other interesting part about that is Cheryl decided that, we went to Hong Kong for a week after the program was over, because one lady from Hong Kong, young lady from Hong Kong, visited the place where I was staying, the pension, and worked for a little while there, and went back to Hong Kong. She said, "Now, when it's over, y'all come to Hong Kong and stay." So we called her and asked her to help find us a place to stay there, that we were going to come that for that week. And so Cheryl and I get on the plane, and we don't really know for sure if she got the message, because we had to give the message to someone else on the phone. It was difficult to call from Japan to Hong Kong and get somebody. But her name was Duet, and we were on the plane. The plane was supposed to arrive like 8 o'clock at night, and we were hoping that she was to be there to meet us and to tell us where we would be staying, a hotel. Well, there was really, really bad weather, and so the plane was delayed quite a bit. It turned out that we didn't arrive until midnight, but as we were flying, it was very rough. The plane was just bouncing all over the place, and they were making announcements in Chinese, and we couldn't understand,
Korean.
and Korean and everything, and we couldn't understand anything that they were saying. So we were just kind of laughing about the whole thing, because when the plane finally landed, it was like bumpity, 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 and we looked at each other and said, "This pilot must be his first time flying, because he is really having trouble with his plane." We kind of thought it was funny, and then and everybody clapped when the plane
And cheered.
finally and cheered when the plane finally stopped. There was clapping and cheering, and we got up to go to the door of the airplane, and they were issuing everyone a hooded raincoat to put on and put the hood on. And so we did, but we didn't get it. I didn't tie mine and button it. And as soon as we stepped out the door, the wind just literally blew it off of me. Because turns out we were in a
Typhoon.
A typhoon, like a level 4, anyway, a very kind of a high level typhoon that we had landed in. Duet was there to meet us, and by the time we got through the airport, it really was very late. And so we were so happy to see her, and she was so happy to see us. She had been worried and waiting that whole time, because she knew that they were having that typhoon there, and that it was going to be very difficult for us to fly in. So anyway, we had a week there, at which point during that week, not only did I meet 2 friends from Georgia Southwestern that I had no idea would be there, but I also, on one of our trips over to another island, I stepped off a ledge and sprained my ankle badly. It was swollen very, very bad. And so when we went back to Japan, to Tokyo, we stayed with a family overnight there till our plane was leaving for the next day. And Cheryl decided that she saw in the paper some advertisements for jobs in Japan, in Tokyo. And she decided, since I couldn't get out and do anything, that she would go and interview for those jobs. So she interviewed for 2 jobs, and her Japanese was so wonderful that she was offered jobs for both of them. So that was pretty neat. After we came back home, she did sell all her worldly possessions and went to Japan and ended up staying there 4 years. So it was an interesting experience, an interesting opportunity that we took in going to Japan, and it certainly changed, the direction of our lives for a period of time. An additional program after we got back from Japan was, and the fact that Cheryl went back over to teach. She was first teaching businessmen and getting them ready to come to this country to study, to do graduate work. And they had been going for language instruction, English language instruction, to some of the larger universities, the Harvard and Michigan State and some of the really larger universities. And Cheryl said, "Why don't you go to Georgia Southwestern?" That's where I went. And they were so impressed with her and thought that she was so great that the head of the program came over and she said, "You can stay with my parents." So they stayed with us, and um, they enjoyed meeting all the people, and they liked what they saw at the Georgia Southwestern, and so they did start sending the Japanese businessmen to Americas, and I helped with the Asian program just because I was interested in it. To find places for them to stay because each businessman had to stay with a different family. And these were Japanese businessmen who didn't know much English, some of them, and some of them knew a little bit more, but they were kind of being immersed into the language with the family. So that was pretty interesting, and it was a great program that Cheryl helped to start and that we were involved in for quite a number of years.
Did you have some people stay with you as well?
We had Japanese businessmen stay with us. Yes, we did. It was a wonderful experience because you got to meet um, and see the customs and hear something about the instructions. And David really enjoyed that a lot too, getting to see more of the students and the people from Japan. There's another program that was started also. I can't really remember the name of that program with the Japanese, but I do remember that the first year that we had the Japanese businessmen, the lady who had been teaching them, they had been going to Harvard University, and the lady had been teaching them from Harvard. We ended up having her come down to Americas that summer to teach them, and she was like, "I don't want to be down here in this hot weather and mosquitoes, and how come how come I have to come here, and why aren't you in up here at Harvard?"
Mm-hmm.
But they loved being in Americas, and we had after that first year, we didn't have to bring her back down. We were able to do the teaching ourselves. Um, Certain people were. I was not involved in the teaching of that, but certainly was involved in helping with acclimate the Japanese men and the students to our campus. So that was a good program.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the leadership positions that you've had and some of the awards that you've been given through the years? I know it seems like almost every organization that you've ever been a member of, you were president of at some point.
True. That is true. Even recently, but I guess one of the really interesting ones was when I got the Georgia's Woman of the Year in Achievement. And that was sort of based on a number of programs that I was involved in at the time. And some of them had to do with trying to help children who were disadvantaged, working with some of the children in the projects, and trying to get them so that they could read, take them to restaurants, to know how to handle themselves at a nice restaurant, or just teaching some general skills for them, and even bringing some of the parents of those children in to teach them something about computers, give them a little bit of extra skills. But I tried to do a lot with disadvantaged students in that way. And then as well, I did some programs for gifted children. And based on a number of different kinds of programs that I had been involved in, I was named the Woman of Achievement for Sumter County. After the Woman of Achievement in Sumter County went on to a regional competition, and I was awarded the regional Woman of Achievement, and then to the state level, and I was awarded the state Woman of Achievement. So that was really kind of special to have that go all the way. Rosalind Carter had that too at one point in time. So that was a nice thing. There were other organizations that I was involved in from the first time that I started teaching in Georgia Southwestern. I guess professionally that would be the time to mention. I was I was at one time president of the Faculty Wives Club, and was involved in helping to start a wine tasters group for that, and an international dinner club for that. And that was mentioned today. You heard both of those. That was reminding me of it. And a number of other things that I was involved in, pretty much everything that went on, it seemed like. But I guess the some of the other things that I was involved in more recently was like president of the garden club, president of the women's literary club, sort of the still the den mother, as David calls it, for wine tasters, keeping that group together. And once I retired, then I've been involved in the retired association, Georgia Southwestern Association of Retirees, and helped with the social activities for that group.
You were on the elections board too, right? Is that?
I was on the elections board for a long time. Yeah, the Board of Elections that handles all the elections at the county. So yes, I've been involved in that for many years. I was chair of the Democratic Committee for many years, and co-chair for many years, probably more than 20 altogether. And then treasurer of that, most recently treasurer of the Democratic Committee, and involved in it from the time Jimmy Carter started in 1976 until just recently. Past few years, I've become somewhat discouraged with politicians and the partisanship that there is. So I have not been as active in that. But I was active with the elections board until just recently as well. I have rotated off that board, thank goodness. But I'm still involved in doing some things with them. And that's all I can think of right this moment.
Okay.
I've got some awards with the College Reading Association, the outstanding award for that group, for a national award. And I've been on the state Democratic Committee. I've been on, state boards and working with a number of organizations as well.
Were you on the board of the Fuller Center for Housing?
I was on the board of the Fuller Center for Housing. In fact, I was on their first international board, and I served on that board for quite a number of years. And I was president of the local affiliate for Habitat for Humanity for quite a number of years as well. One of my greatest accomplishments and legacy would be my children and grandchildren. We were blessed with two wonderful children, a girl, a boy, Cheryl and Brad, and they have brought us much joy through the years. Both of them are beautiful, they're handsome, they're smart, they're talented, and they're thoughtful, they're sweet. I can just go on and on. And I love them dearly. They have also given us grandchildren, which we thoroughly enjoy and love very much. Cheryl married Bill Lane, and the two of them have given us Austin, Brendan, Christina, and Caitlin. Actually, I wanted 3 children, and we only had 2 because David was very much into environmental issues, and we should only have 2 children, he said. But I remember Cheryl asking me once that, she said, I remember you said one of your only regrets was that you didn't have that 3rd child. And she wanted to have a 3rd child. And at the time, she wanted us to move to Atlanta. We tried. It didn't work out. But, yeah, so she had the 3rd and 4th. 2 boys and 2 girls. And Brad had 2 boys and 1 girl. Brad married Penny and had Jonathan first, and then Benjamin, and then Sarah. And later, there was a divorce, and Brad married Jerry Ramey Schultz and and we got 3 bonus grandchildren with that marriage, Nathaniel, Lucas, and Andrew. So we have enjoyed so much having that extension in our life. The children, their spouses, and the grandchildren have been a real blessing to us.
June and David through the years, starting as newlyweds in the 60s. And with our friend, let's see, 3 roommates married 3 roommates. I'll have to tell you that. I was living with 3 other ladies, and we had a party over at, David and I ended up getting married. We had a party over at our house. It was a beatnik party. And we were dressed up as beatniks here. That's David
What's a
and me.
beatnik?
It's I don't know how to describe that. Back in the day, kind of like, I don't know. How do you describe a beatnik?
I don't know.
You don't know a beatnik? Maybe we should start
It's
over.
all right. It's all right.
Okay. So these are our friends who turned out to be really great friends. Robert and Peggy ended up getting married. Max and Betty ended up getting married, and David and I were already married. So those were the 3 roommates who married 3 roommates.
You were matchmakers.
And so there we are together. We began our families together, and we had children, and we met. We stayed in touch all through the years, and it was so nice to have those wonderful friends. And then November 4th, 1960, we had a little baby girl, Cheryl. And this is the cradle, which also rocked her father, David. And then this is my mother with little baby Cheryl. And this is David's mother with Cheryl. And now we have a little baby boy, Brad. And this is Brad's first haircut. And this is Cheryl talking to Brad. There's 6 years difference. So she loved being able to play with him. He was a little plaything. And this is my daddy holding. And this is your cousin, my nephew, Greg. Billy's little boy. And this is what we were doing the 6 years between having babies, getting our doctorate. And we love to go to the beach, go to Callaway Gardens or the beach. And here we are with Cheryl. Oh, and this is feeding the duck in Athens. This is cute little Cheryl who loved feeding the ducks. But sometimes she was afraid they were going to get her.
Yep.
And this is one of the tents. And Cheryl had a little camping chair that was so adorable. And we had fun with our tent. And that particular time, it started raining, and the tent got wet, and we were in the shadows, so we had to move out to a sunny spot.
Here's Peppy.
Oh, and there's Peppy. Peppy was just the sweetest little phantom poodle. And that's a cute picture of Brad holding Peppy. Well, on our farm, which we bought after we moved to America, so we bought a tree farm. We went out. Brad wanted to go camping one day on the 4th of July and camp out. Cheryl was somewhere else, older and gone. And this giant rattlesnake we saw, and there were others around there. So we ended up not staying overnight in the 100-degree temperature. This was on a auto train where Cheryl was working as and helping with the auto train after being a
Senate intern.
Yes, Senate intern. That's what I was trying to say. And Francis' husband at the time was director of auto train, and Cheryl got to be the head person for a long time that summer. But anyway, here we are. Oh, this is, they talked me into being a strolling accordionist at the Andersonville Fair one day, and that Daddy and Mother came down, and that's Daddy, and I did that one time. I would not do it again because I'm not that good, and it was a little challenging for me to wander around the fair playing. Other pictures. These are our friends, the Bollibers. We were on their sailboat. We enjoyed traveling with them some, and also sailing. There's Cheryl with her daddy. Looks like a birthday, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And Brad had gone with the singers to Europe, and in Amsterdam, the family that he stayed with gave him some tulip bulbs, and he brought those back, and we planted them, and they turned out great. Really beautiful. And this is a sweet picture of Cheryl and her parents. And this was sort of the end of the 90s. We were on a trip somewhere when we stopped and took this picture, but yeah. That was it.
The back cover.
Oh, I'll bet there is. Yes. And here is our Japanese son right there. Hiroyuki Kuno. That's when he had first come, and we were going to go sailing with the Bollibers, and he was so concerned about that. He really wanted to stay home and study, but we talked him into. I said, I'll help you study on the way. We'll study whatever you need in the car on the way. We went to Jimmy Carter's church first, and then we went so that he could meet him, and then we went sailing. Yeah, and that's sort of the end of that. That takes us through a good bit. One of the books that I put together was David in the Early Years, and this is the one of June and the Early Years, of some pictures that I found of me when I was just a wee thing. And here, of course, I hadn't been born too long after that, but that's the earliest picture I have of me, and then these pictures. We still have this little bench up in the room where you're staying now, Cheryl. And my tricycle, with my cousin playing house, and the little baby doll, more cousins. This is my brother, Billy. Oh, I do like these cute pictures with the. I just think that's so interesting looking. That's my brother and two cousins with this little cart that the goat was pulling. And yeah, oh, and this is Tippy, our little dog. Here's me at the birthday. We had chickens. I told you we had chickens, you know. My sister Mary Alice on these pictures. She's the one who was 9 years older. Billy was 6 years older.
This is the three of you, right?
That's the
right
three
here.
of us right there.
Let me see if I can get it to focus better.
Oh.
Doesn't want to focus.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah. There's the three of us.
Cute picture.
Yeah. And this is a picture. I like this picture of Mother and me sitting down together. And this one of Daddy and me. Well, you can't. He's taller where he's standing up, but I think it's kind of a cute one. And then the old family reunion pictures. I would be the little, one of the little ones somewhere. There, I guess. There's Billy. We're kind of bored of the picture taking by then. It looks like Mary Alice.
You can point.
Yeah.
Down here.
Oh, let's see. Mary Alice and my daddy and Mama.
And where are you and Billy?
And Billy is here. And here I am. The bored ones.
Yep.
And this is my daddy's birthday celebration a long time ago with, that would be Mary Alice. Yeah. That would be me, the little girl there. And this is my granddaddy. This is Mother's daddy, the only grandparent I ever knew. You can't see it very well in this picture, unfortunately. But, yeah. You saw me. I couldn't see. I don't see. Is that Billy? Maybe.
Maybe so.
I can't tell for sure off in this one. Not sure. Okay. With my little girlfriends here and a little birthday party. Playing with a goat. Accordion, saxophone, tap dancing. That was really the main thing that I enjoyed so much as a kid. And there I am as the lady in red in one of our dance routines, and had to sing and dance Candy and Cake, and that one was a pink satin outfit. This was like red sequin shoes and the whole thing.
Can't tell from the black and white pictures.
I know, it's hard to tell. Saxophone, we just did a lot of programs, different places, and here we are with the accordion. And here was when I was the majorette there. And we actually had a snow in LaGrange. Can you believe it snowed that much? That's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
And then a few pictures as I'm growing up. I wish these were in color. With my red hair was nice back then. And, Southwest LaGrange Elementary School. This is when we graduated from school. And this was in the church where we got married, the Southwest LaGrange Baptist Church. Then it went on a little bit more still dancing during the 50s. This is the thing of the 50s. Two of my best friends. And this is an article that featured me that told all about the dancing in the different areas. And this is when I was actually down here was when I was a freshman in college, because this is when we were doing the jazz, the modern dance. Modern dance was so different from what I was accustomed to with tap dancing. But this was a saxophone group and an accordion group that I played in. Yep.
Also while you were in college?
No, that was actually before college.
Okay.
Some of these are before college, and this was in high school still, because this was when I was in a basketball team. That's me. We had beautiful bright green satin outfit. And tennis, swimming.
See the bathing beauty over here.
Yeah, swimming. Did some swimming and diving. And this was when I was Miss Peach Meat at one of the big events. These were scholarships when I got the scholarship. This was the Callaway Band. The Callaway Band played at Callaway Gardens when they were open too. And this is when I was Miss Playground Queen.
Wow, I didn't know about that. Playground Queen.
Yes. Isn't that something? Yep. And this is, actually we were still in high school. I just went with some friends to look at school down in Tallahassee University.
You had a tiny waist.
I had a tiny waist back then.
Look at that.
Yes, I did. Itsy bitsy. And this is when I was in the University Men's Glee Club. I mentioned that there were some soloists. They had a few soloists for performances.
Where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
And just random pictures at the end. This was actually one of the dance routines, and this was the lady in red. This was sort of a scene with the other dancers around, and those were the 5 scholarship winners, and we earned our degrees about then. Oh, this was at high school. You know what they have, that dress-up day? I forget what it's called now. At high schools. This was Lamar Lyons. He was the cutest little guy, and he looked like a girl. He dressed up like a girl that really looked like a girl then. He turned out to be an art teacher, I think, at a university. Cheryl. Then I graduated from high school and headed off to college.
You got your camera.
Why
are you holding the camera here?
Someone said that I want you to go. I have a friend who's learning to be a photographer, and he will take some pictures if you'll agree to go. And so I was wearing that dress, but he put on some other things on and took some pictures. David actually went with me. That's after I'd met David. We weren't married, but I'd met him. And he took several pictures of me that I wish I knew where they were, because they turned out to be interesting pictures. I mean, kind of, like modeling.
Yeah.
And that was one of them, but that's the only one that I can find. And here I am, just in college, with some of my girlfriends and some of my boyfriends. And then I got married. Ended the 50s by marrying David.
Yep.
Okay. One of the pictures that the photographer made that was learning to be a photographer. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that one. That one's really pretty.
Okay.
So we moved out to Lake Collins area from Pecan Drive, where we had lived for 40-something years, near the campus of Georgia Southwestern State University, where we both taught. But David had always wanted to live by water, so here we are.
Well, tell me about the artwork, and then we'll get a good look at your beautiful view.
Well, after I stopped teaching and retired from that area, I really have always loved art. So I took a course, and the first week of the course, well, it was a 1-week course, we painted 3 pictures. This one of granddaughter Sarah, and this one of granddaughter Christina, and this one of granddaughter Caitlin. So the 3 granddaughters got the first paintings that I ever did. Actually, I had not painted any with oils, and so I had to buy everything at this workshop, my paints and my brushes and canvas and everything. So it was really a starting from scratch. But since then, I painted a lot of other things, so you'll see as we walk through the house a little bit of some of the other paintings. This is another one I did of our son Brad and his 2 boys, Jonathan and Benjamin. And a little bit later on, Jonathan grew up, and so did Ben with his guitar there. And of course, at one of the workshops, I painted Austin and Brendan, Cheryl's 2 boys, our grandsons. And let's see, Cheryl asked me to paint a picture of her mom and daddy. So I painted this, and then her daddy wanted to keep it for now. So she hasn't gotten that yet, but that one was one that she wanted to paint. And then when Brad was in a photography class, he took this picture of Cheryl, and I thought it was really a nice picture to paint, so I painted that one of her. And this is sort of the gallery of the children and grandchildren.
What about this, these things over here?
All right, we're starting a little bit early with Christmas decorations, and David's mother made the figurines and painted the figurines that go with the manger scene there, and then I put it together with a wooden manger, etc. And she also did the Christmas tree there, which we have enjoyed so much. She did the crocheting of the poinsettia there on that pillow, and a couple of other things. She did the Mr. and Mrs. Santa out of bottles, at least the base of it of bottles, but we've enjoyed using all of those. And then I just found out that Caitlin's favorite decoration she did was right over here. And it is to the bathroom, there's Santa saying hi, but when you come inside, he covers his eyes nicely. So that's cute. It actually was supposed to go on the toilet seat, but we didn't think that was a good idea.
No.
So it's nice on the door. I did these 2 paintings as just some little acrylics no, I think this one is a little watercolor I was trying to play with, and that one is an acrylics. So.
Okay.
I think that if you want to come on in this room, we'll look at a few of the paintings that you see here. I did most of these. This is the last one I did. I'm not quite sure that I'm finished with it, of Brad and Jerry, but at any rate, it's pretty close. And then Caitlin, I love this picture of Caitlin. We were at Virginia Beach, and she had a new little swimsuit, and she was twirling around at the beach, and I snapped this picture, and when I came home, I thought, well, that's just too cute not to paint. So that's one of the ones we painted. Let's see. David's favorite of my paintings is the roses. He loves the roses. And I don't know that I have a favorite per se, but I rather like the sort of the first big acrylic painting that I did, which was this flower arrangement, and also the this lady. Is it okay to say Asian?
Yes, this Asian lady.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
right.
Nice.
That one.
Some more of your paintings here. These are all your paintings, right?
Yes. And those I just kind of wanted to get an idea of how to paint glass. Those I did at workshop. And same with those two there. Mackinac Island with the horses. Our teacher took a picture from a story with a fringe on top. Actually, the picture of the horses had a fringe coming down on the top. I left that off the painting.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's the main ones that are upstairs. I have a few downstairs, my Indians and cowboys. But that's most of the ones upstairs. I got a few in the other rooms. You may not want to go in there.
Do you want, we can. Do you want to look at, do you want to show a few more of your paintings from the other rooms? These are all your paintings on this wall, except
Pretty
for a
much.
couple
Except for a
here,
couple.
up there.
Yeah.
It's hard to see these because of the glare.
Yeah, the large head is, and the one beside it is not mine
Right.
to the left, but
Right.
most of the others are.
So here's a cute one of an angel.
Yeah, I did some angels.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, this is not a nice room. It's dirty. It's Papa's room. Did that one,
Mm-hmm.
and this little watercolor. I decided after doing that watercolor, maybe I shouldn't do any more watercolor.
That's pretty.
But it's okay. Yeah.
It's your first watercolor, or one of your
Yeah,
first.
it's one of those first
So
watercolors,
practicing always helps you to get better and better.
right. And these are two little studies, just sort of like quick studies of how to do the face of children, because it's a little bit different to do the children and get the proportion of the eyes and so forth, and still make them look little,
Yeah.
young.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing in my bedroom that I did was, I hadn't folded up the clothes.
It's all right.
And finished the laundry. This I wish you could see. It's actually a needlework,
Mm-hmm.
embroidery. It's just a big embroidered piece.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty. And here's your view from your bedroom is really beautiful. View
Yes,
of
it
the
is.
lake.
Yes, it is nice.
And the Japanese maple is beautiful. There's tennis courts out here.
Okay.
Oh, and here's a nice wedding picture.
Yeah, I guess that is.
Mm-hmm.
That would be 1959. This is interesting. This is one David painted. The pointer.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to get him to do some more paintings, but so far, no luck.
Yep, he's a good artist too.
He would do good if he would do it. Did you want to go downstairs or not?
Sure. We'll go downstairs. Why not? While we're walking around.
Okay. Oh, my beautiful daughter did this embroidered work for her daddy.
Mm-hmm.
It was on a shirt, but when the shirt wore out, we framed it.
He gave me the shirt and I gave it back to him in a frame.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is Uncle Dave's artwork
Right.
right here.
Yeah.
He mentioned that, Uncle Dave and his.
Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here are some more things that I had painted. This is similar to one I did upstairs, and then this is just a watercolor portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And you can
Those are
skip
nice.
over. You can skip over that.
This one is in progress, but it looks good through the camera. It's very
not-
cute. Very cute raccoon in progress.
And here are mine. I really sort of like these. My Indians and cowboy.
Mm-hmm. Two Indians
There's
and
an
a
Indian
cowboy.
princess. There's an Indian princess we did at a workshop, and also a cowboy. And at that same workshop, I happened to see a poster of an Indian chief, so I took it home that night and painted it.
Wow. You're fast.
Surprised the teacher.
Mm-hmm, I bet.
And my daughter did this beautiful painting of a lion. Isn't that great? That looks so real. Now the masks that you see there, I did in a pottery class.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I need to fix them so they'll hang somewhere, but
Mm-hmm.
there they are now. Oh, actually I did this too. It hasn't been framed yet. I'll show it to you. It's, oops, one side. It's the Serenity Prayer in
Oh.
cross stitch.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So I would like, I need to get that framed,
Mm-hmm.
but it took me a while to finish it.
When did you do that? Recently or a long
Yeah, I
time
finished it recently, but
Mhm.
it's been in progress
It was-
years.
yeah. Set
Because it's
aside for a
one of-
while?
yeah, one of those things you pick up occasionally and then put
Mm-hmm.
it down and pick it up again.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Okay.
Anything
that's the-
else?
Those are the paintings.
Okay. You have a beautiful view here, and I know you enjoy the birds also, and the raccoons or whatever gets in your
You remember
bird feeders.
that.
Yeah.
I know you remember that. Yeah, well, yeah, we do enjoy the view very much. That's one of the neat things about this this room. It's such a pretty view down to the lake and through the trees.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful wreath and beautiful tree and beautiful view.
Really stop for a while.